Hello, everyone, and welcome to the reincarnation of Hog Talk, an IceHogs podcast where we're going to get into everything team-related. We'll get you player updates, and, of course, we'll have a lot of fun guests on throughout the season as well. My name is Mike Folta. I'm the team broadcaster embarking on this journey with you throughout this season. We're excited to be able to bring you this content. We're going to have a lot of fun bringing you this content and kind of peeling back the curtain a little bit throughout the season. The 2023-2024 season is just about here. IceHogs have released the schedule. They've released the promo schedule. And now all that's left to do is get ready for training camp and start playing some hockey here. Our first guest here on episode 1 of Hog Talk is going to be none other than the president of hockey operations and the general manager of the IceHogs, Mark Bernard. So we'll talk to Bernie here in just a little bit. But before we get to Bernie, some housekeeping items for you. We're going to try and bring you these episodes every couple weeks. We'd love to get you this content every day. But unfortunately, the throws and the constraints of a 72-game schedule make that a little bit tough. And so every 2 weeks is going to be our goal. We're going to throw in some bonus episodes as well throughout the year, like we are here in episode 1. Our interview with Bernie coming up was so outstanding that we had to split it up into 2 parts. We went about an hour long with Mark Bernard in the interview. So part 1 is the one that you're listening to right now. Part 2 we're releasing right after as well. So be sure to listen to both. Want to mention as well, you'll notice kind of where we're recording inside, wearing a golf tee, all that stuff. In the words of Darius Rucker, it won't be like this for long. We're just starting this up. We don't have all the bells and whistles for Hog Talk quite yet, but we are planning on really upping the ante, if you will, for the show, including more graphical elements if you're watching on YouTube, including some more things that make it more exciting to listen to and to watch as well, like these openers and transitions and things like that. So we're also planning on having a fancier backdrop in the future. All that's coming. But that's all to say that episode 5 might look different than what you're watching right now here in episode 1. So we wanted to get this ship out of the harbor and off to sea. So that's why we're going a little bit more nuts and bolts, a little grittier here in the first episode of Hog Talk. If you're not subscribed to the IceHogs YouTube channel, please do. Wherever you're watching or consuming Hog Talk here in episode 1, please like and subscribe. That whole gambit. It's free to do. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us out, and it helps us kind of analyze our audience, if you will, because we hope that our audience is as big as possible, and we want to bring as many as we can around this dinner table that is IceHogs hockey. We also want to make this an interactive experience for you, the listener or the viewer. And so I'm going to put my email up on the screen. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll address them on the show as we continue to move along. And not just questions, I'd love to hear maybe some what-ifs. What if the IceHogs leading scorer is a rookie that we previously haven't seen? What if the IceHogs are able to run the table and sweep all 8 home games in February? What if these things happen? I would love to hear your prepositions and maybe some bold predictions as well. So throw all that my way. You can also reach out on Twitter as well. You can comment underneath the post where these clips or where these podcasts are being posted on social media. We will look at all of those questions and all of those predictions and all of those what-ifs, and we will get to as many as we can on the show. But we want this to be an interactive experience for everybody that's tuned in. We're going to talk prospect camp. We had that last weekend. We're going to get to that. Going to get to some team news coming up. That's going to be in the second part of episode 1 here. So here in part 1, just kind of knocking some housekeeping out of the way, and then getting to Mark Bernard, who we're actually going to go to right now. One quick note about the interview that, again, is broken up into 2 parts. It was an awesome talk with Bernie. I will say this, though. We put the podcast in podcast. It's not a very linear interview. We bounce all around from Mark Bernard's playing days in the UK when he was a player, a coach, a GM, and a salesperson all at the same time. We talk about what the trade deadline was like for him last year. We talk about what this offseason has been like and who were some of the guys to keep an eye on this year. we go everywhere. So our advice to you is to just sit back and enjoy the ride. But without any further ado, let's get to the president of hockey operations and the general manager for the IceHogs, Mark Bernard. And we are sure proud to welcome on the first guest of the reincarnation of Hog Talk, none other than our president of hockey operations and our general manager, Mark Bernard, more affectionately known as Bernie. Bernie, have a lot of things I want to go over here in this episode, but first of all, our stats and research department, aka some of the research that was done before I got here, dug up this awesome nugget that you once had 4 assists in a game playing goalie with the Bracknell Bees, I believe it was. Do you remember what that game was like?
Actually, it was crazy, because my first assist came in the last minute of the second period, and then I got 3 assists in the last 10 minutes of the game to get the 4. And at the time, I didn't know it was a record. Like I figured Ron Hextall or Grant Fuhr, someone from the 80s when it was very offensively minded, would have had that record. And then I got a call from the Hockey Hall of Fame, to which the first, back then you didn't have, I'm dating myself, there was no cell phones or computers, and, you just picked up or the phone took a message for you. But the guy from the Hockey Hall of Fame called Craig Campbell, and I hung up. I thought it was one of my buddies pulling a prank on me. So then he called back and said, just call me at this number and you'll see that it's not a prank. And I was so apologetic, and he's like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, we got people that do that all the time to us. And he told me it was a pro hockey record. The NHL record is held by Jeff Reese, that at the time he was playing for the Calgary Flames. And he was actually one of my favorite goalies growing up in the OHL. And he set the record of 3 assists playing against the San Jose Sharks in their inaugural season. But yeah, so my stick's in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and it's funny that you bring this up, because about 3 days ago I was actually looking at the game sheet and the letter from the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I've never had it framed. I've always just got it kind of stored away, and my wife's like, you should have that framed. Like, yeah, it's a record since 1997, and so I've got it sent out right now to get framed for me so I could put it up in the basement.
Or any of your teammates kind of mad at you? I mean, 4 assists in a game, like, how often does that happen for, a forward over the course of a career? You did it as a goaltender.
No, they were all happy. It was funny because when I had 3 assists, the other team had pulled their goalie. I didn't make as many saves as I probably had assists that night, so it was a bit of a high-scoring game. So I think it was like 6-5 going into the last minute, and they pulled their goalie face off in our zone, and our players all came to me and said, if we win the draw, we're just going to tackle our guys, shoot for the empty net. 1 and 3 would be a great night. And of course, we lost the zone. We lost the face off, went to the point. I made a save, passed it up to one of my players, who passed it forward and ended up in the net. But I'm pretty lucky when I think of those things, to have that record, and then I think I'm one of 3 goalies to score 2 goals. So I was pretty lucky during my career.
Well, you mentioned the 2 goals aspect. That was kind of the second little nugget I was going to bring up, because the other 2 guys who have scored 2 goals professionally, one of them you've already brought up, Ron Hextall, the other a guy named Martin Brodeur, both ended up doing okay for themselves.
Yeah.
Do you guys send each other Christmas cards every year? Or, what was it like, to score those 2, but to be a part of that company?
Well, it was kind of funny. My first goal happened right near the end of what I thought was my career in Toledo. I'd come back. I was 32 years old, and I was playing my last year, and my wife was due any time with our son Jackson. She actually left the game after the second period. She wasn't feeling great, and they dumped the puck in, and we were shorthanded. They had pulled their goalie, dumped the puck in 2 times. I stopped it behind the net, rang it around the boards and out. So the third time they dumped it in, I came out of my net. And I looked, and everybody had shifted to the board. So I just stepped out and shot it right down the middle of the ice, and it went dead center of the net. And I didn't even know how to react. Like I was like so excited.
That was your first one ever.
Yeah, that was my first goal ever. And then fast forward, I went into coaching for the next 2 years over here in North America, or 3 years in North America, and then I went over to England. And my second year in England, so I'd been retired 4.5 years, hadn't had the goal equipment on. Something happened with our our starting goalie decided he didn't want to play hockey anymore, and he left to come home. And it was a Wednesday night. We played Saturday, Sunday, and I went home that night. My wife's looked at me and said, "Don't even tell me you're thinking what I think." And I'm like, I don't have a choice, because at that time the league was probably comparable. It was probably between the ECHL and the American League level. It was a good, very good hockey.
Over in UK.
Yeah, in the UK, you had 13 import players. One being your goaltender, and probably 6 or 7 forwards and 4 or 5 D, and your backup goalie was a young British goalie that could basically play a third period or play mop-up duty if you wanted to give your starter a break in a game, but you weren't starting them at that time. There's a few really good UK goalies now, but at that point you weren't starting them. And
right.
I had to have one of my players on my team was actually, his parents were flying over from Toronto. I had to get my parents to get my goal equipment out of storage after my mom yelled at me for half an hour. And it got over Friday night at midnight, and I started Saturday night. The first shot I faced in 4.5 years was in warm-up that night. And we lost 6-5. And then the next day in Nottingham, the fans in Nottingham were always so great to me, like right from the first time I went over there and played. And they were cheering for me. They always get about 7,000-8,000 fans, and they sing songs, and they were cheering for me.
It's like a soccer atmosphere.
Yeah,
right?
It's a tremendous atmosphere. And they've always been good to me, and they knew everybody in the country at that point in hockey knew what I was doing. And I don't know, like that night we lost 4-1, but I had 40 something saves. Like I'd fall down and the puck would hit me, but I couldn't get out of bed Monday morning. And that week looked for a goalie, couldn't find one that I was happy with. Come Saturday, I started again, and same scenario, like face off.
When you say one that you weren't happy with, there wasn't one that was better than you, is what you're saying.
Well, there wasn't one that I thought could come in and be the starter for us, because we were in October. Everybody that was worth their salt was already signed.
Yeah.
So Saturday night came, we're winning late in the game, shorthanded again. They pull their goalie. The face-off's just outside the our defensive blue line. They win it back to their defenseman on the board side. He wound up like he was going to rim it in around the board. So I took a couple steps out of the net to cut it off behind the net. And I just got that feeling, and any goalie will know what I'm talking about, that I'm like, he's going to throw it at the net and see if he can catch me cheating. So I stepped back into the net, and sure enough, he shot at the net. I caught it, dropped it, and shot right up the middle of the ice. And like I said, I hadn't been in goal for 4.5 years. Like I had no strength. And I think if the puck got over the goal line by about 2 inches, I was lucky. And
didn't even hit the back of the net.
Oh, didn't even come close to the back of the net. And at that time, my mom and dad were over visiting, which was nice. And the place is going bonkers. And my teammates were like, "Oh my God, we can't believe we just saw that." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's not bad. 2 goals in my last 10 games."
Yeah.
And they're like, "What?" And I go, "Well, there's 4.5 years between them." But I ended up that year, I just kept playing. I ended up.
Were you still coaching?
I was the GM of the building.
Okay.
I ran the building. I was GM of the team. I was the head coach, and ended up being the starting goalie. And I just took the money that I had set aside for a goalie. I didn't pay myself to do it. I took that money. I released one defenseman, took his money, combined it, and I brought over a really good defenseman, Brett Larson, that's now the head coach of St. Cloud University.
Okay.
And to try and kind of make it stronger around me.
Yeah.
But I ended up playing 37 games that year. Like, if you look, I look like a stay-at-home defenseman. I had 1 goal, 4 assists, and 88 penalty minutes that year. So
88 penalty minutes?
Yeah.
That sounds like a story in and of itself.
Yeah, I kind of played on the edge. My wife likes to use a different adjective about me when I played. But I couldn't be one of those guys that was loosey-goosey and just go in net and play. Like, I had to be borderline idiot. Like, I found
part of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, like I kind of played like Billy Smith and Ron Hextall. Like, I wasn't afraid to hack guys, whack guys, get in fights. Like, I liked that kind of stuff. It got me into the game. This past winter, when I was fortunate enough to get inducted into the ECHL Hall of Fame, my son was at school. He texted me and said, "The only thing I'm disappointed about, Dad, when I'm looking at all your stats is you're number 2 in goalies for penalty minutes all time in the ECHL. I thought you'd be number 1. So I'm like, well, just don't do whatever I did. Do the opposite, because the game isn't that way anymore. And that's why I don't think I liked head coaching. You know, when I went into coaching, you always think that's what you want to do. I loved being the assistant coach. I was too intense to be a head coach. Like, I expected guys to do what I was willing to do. And that's not the way it is. So that's, you know, I found out very quickly that's not what I like to do. But I was fortunate enough when I coached in Toledo as the assistant coach with Claude Noel, I kind of did the salary cap, all the recruiting and things like that. And I really fell in love with the management side of the game. And if it wasn't for my time in England, though, like 2 years I was over there, I did everything. There was no staff.
You learned a lot. I mean, playing at, you know, what, 4 different levels, being GM, coach, player.
When I went back over there, I was over there from 96 to 2000 as a coach. And then I came back for my last year playing, 3 years of coaching, went back over as a coach and GM of the team. I sat down with the owner of the team in the coffee shop connected to the rink. And the first thing he says to me is, "You're not going to win here." And I'm like, "Oh,
thanks."
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, "Okay, can I get an extension?" I'm like, "Well, why?" And he goes, our budget's about a third of the other teams. He goes, "Just be competitive." He goes, "But we're losing way too much money." They had lost the equivalent of maybe $300,000 the year before, American. And I'm like, "Well, what does your staff in the office say?" And he's like, looking at me, he goes, "Well, his assistant had hired me." And he said, "I don't think you've got the full story." And I'm like, "What's the full story?" He goes, "You're the staff." So I had to do...
Excuse me?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, "Pardon?" And I'm like, I had to do all the corporate sales.
So they brought you over before you even knew that you were going to be selling and knocking on people's doors
and
trying to sell
I guess
season
I didn't read the fine print. And buyer beware. Yeah. But I had to do the corporate, the merchandise, the marketing, the season ticket sales. I wrote the program every week. Like, I had it down to a T where, like, Monday by 3, I had to have the program written up for the next weekend, or else it wouldn't have been back from the printer on time on Friday. And we were losing money on that program, so I changed how we were doing it, and we ended up making money on that. I did a lot of different things, but I found like I was only putting about 10% of my time into the coaching. The rest of it was into the marketing of the team and merchandise and stuff like that. Well, after my first year, I think we cut it from 300 down to about 140, 130. So he was thrilled.
Yeah.
And that's when he named me the general manager of the arena as well. So now I had a staff of probably about 15 to 20 full-time employees, another 15 part-time employees. And, you know, like on a Tuesday, we would practice in the morning because it's a public rink. You know, there's not rinks like in the U.S. and Canada where there's where the pro team plays and then there's the youth hockey rinks. This, you know,
it's all one rink.
It's all one rink. And so like on a Tuesday morning, I would practice, come off the ice, get my skates. I would jump on the Zamboni and do the ice so that the figure skating group can go on. Because there was no need to have someone else on duty because I was there.
You were already there.
And like a Saturday night after our game, the bar was open till 2 o'clock. So I had to be there till 2 to close out the bar. The ice stopped at midnight. There was public skating after our games, which is absolutely huge in the UK. Like, you can't see the ice. There's that many people out there. So from midnight till 2, I would work on the ice. I would Zamboni it, cut it, edge it, do the laundry for the team.
Were you giving it a goalie cut, leaving a little rough patch in front of the
Well, I've got a funny story about that. And then I would get on the bus. My favorite days were Sunday because we would travel on Sunday to go play an away game. And when I was on the bus, there was nothing I could do. So I'd sleep.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of stress. But for 2 years, that gave me my foundation of coming into the business side of hockey. And I called one of my friends early on and said, "I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know how to do corporate sales and stuff. And he sent me a quote. It was actually by Richard Branson. It said, "If someone offers you a tremendous opportunity and you're not sure if you can do it, say yes and figure it out later." And that's kind of what I went off. And it got me, you know, my success over there landed me the job as the assistant general manager in Norfolk in the American League.
Back where you'd played before. Yeah.
Back where I'd played before. And at that time, it was the farm team of the Chicago Blackhawks in the American League. And I went there as the assistant GM, knowing I was also going to have to do stuff on the business side. I was about a month into my job there when the owner called me in and said, "I want you to take over as president of the team." He was vice president. He was president, but he was living in Florida. He also owned the two AAA baseball teams, 2 AA minor league teams, and he had a big food concession service.
So the
So I ran
the Admirals
everything.
were on the back burner a little bit for him.
Yeah,
he was
came
hands off.
He would come once or twice a year.
Yeah.
So I ran everything from day to day, and we had great success there over 2 years. I was lucky enough to win the Hendy Award for Executive of the Year, and it was at the end of my second year there when Dale Talon offered me a contract to join the Blackhawks, and he actually wanted me to come to Rockford right after my first year when the team was initially moving, and at that time, Bill Wirtz was still alive and running the team, and he didn't want to hire any additional people. So it was that October he passed away, and Dale called me right away and said, "Don't worry, don't sign any extensions. We're going to get you in here at the end of the year." And June 5th of that year, it was my anniversary. That's why I remember it. He offered me a contract to come in, and I've been with the Blackhawks ever since.
So the original connection to the Blackhawks came after you had done all that in the UK and then came back over to, were they the Hampton Roads Admirals still?
At that time, it was the Norfolk Admirals. They had switched. The Hampton Roads Admirals, same venue, same team, everything. They called it the Hampton Roads Admirals because they were trying to encapsulate the whole area.
Right.
And then when they moved up to the American League, they just claimed it as Norfolk Admirals. But I absolutely loved it there. Like, I played there a long time.
You watch videos and see pictures of the Norfolk Scope where they played, and it is insane in the late '90s when you were there winning, playoff MVPs and things like that. I've been there a couple of times in the last couple of years, and they're proud of their Admirals still, but it's just not quite the same.
No, like when I played there from 1990 to 95, 96, the smallest crowd I ever played in front of was 5,700, and that was night.
That's probably 2/3.
Operation.
Maybe?
One of the wars had started in the Gulf, and so the military had to, they were on high alert.
It's a big Navy town.
Navy town. I think it's only second to San Diego as far as naval stations.
Okay.
And otherwise, like in 90, 91, 92, like you didn't have a ticket by Tuesday for Friday night's game. You weren't getting in. Like, I know we had 4,000 season ticket holders, and our owner, Blake Cullen, who passed away during the pandemic, really became my mentor and was fantastic to all of us.
Was that when you were a player there?
Yep. I would ask him questions. He was always so great to me. And, there were strict rules on the salary cap back then. And, he actually paid for my wedding, my honeymoon for my wife and me.
Wow.
He couldn't make it to the wedding. That was his wedding present to us. And he was just a fantastic individual. The only word that best describes him is class. And when I went back and I was running the team, we would have a weekly luncheon, and I would pick his brain, and he was just absolutely fantastic in the way that he treated us as players, and later on the way he treated me, and when I became in management. And
so at that point, did you know that you wanted to get into management when you were a player and you were picking his brain?
Well, I set out from day one. I wanted to play. I wanted to be a National Hockey League player. And obviously that didn't pan out. So I still wanted to get to the NHL. And I had lots of friends back home that were, "Oh, come on, get out of this. You're dragging your family all over the place." Like, I think Jackson moved 9 times before he was 5 years old. And I'm like, "No, I'm going to get to the NHL. I'm going to get to the NHL." And they're like, "Give it up." And then 19 years after I started, I signed my first contract to get to the NHL. So, I always tell kids, if it's in your heart, that's what you want to do, and you have the drive, you can't listen to parents or coaches or teachers, whatever it might be. If that's what you want to do, until you decide that it's not what you want, you've got to keep driving after it and keep striving after it. And that's what I did. And, I guess I'm very fortunate, but 19 years in, I got an NHL contract, and now I'm going into if you count Norfolk, I guess this would be my 17th year with the organization. But, it's been a great ride, and I don't know, not many people know this, but I actually went to training camp with the Blackhawks back in '92, the year that we won the championship in Norfolk, and I was the playoff MVP. One of their scouts, Jim Pappin, had followed us around the playoffs, and about 3 days after we won it, extended an invitation for me to come to training camp, and it was at the old Chicago Stadium, and that was quite a thrill for me.
Yeah. Well, your journey throughout, the minor leagues and into the AHL and now into the NHL organization with the Blackhawks, it's been quite a storied one. It got you into the ECHL Hall of Fame. You were inducted back in Norfolk. How cool was that, by the way, that you were able to be inducted in the town where you left such a legacy?
it meant so much to me. Like when I got that call, I think it was in late October, early November. We were on the road actually when I got the call, and when they told me then that I was being inducted, and they said, you know where the ECHL All-Star game is, and I knew it in the summer, but I'd kind of forgotten about it, and they said it's in Norfolk, and you know it was just that town, the fans there have always treated me like, you know, their own. When I went there, I was a young kid. I was 19 years old. I was right out of high school. And my first 5 games there, I backed up a legendary goalie by the name of Olaf Kolzig, first round pick to the Washington Capitals. And I'm 5'7". We look like Mutt and Jeff. Like I'm 5'7", he's 6'3", 6'4". Well, I think we were 0-4-1 after the first 5 games. And our coach, John Brophy, who's a whole different legend, asked me, he said, he'd always call you Goaler, and then later on he used to call me Mule. And he says, Goaler, can you win tonight for me? And I'm like, yes. So I got the start on a Friday night, and I won and got first star. And then the next night...
So you Wally pipped a first round pick, basically?
And then I come back the next night, I'm starting again, and the fans had made this huge bed sheet banner, and it had a big St. Bernard dog in front of a net, and it had an Admiral's jersey with my number on it. Said St. Bernard, this is his domain. And that
didn't take long.
No, and that hung every game I played there for the rest of my career. They would bring that sign, and they used to Jared Nightingale loves this. They used to bark when I made saves there. It was ridiculous, but the fans were so good to me there, and to have it and be inducted in Norfolk was not only special for me, but special for my family. My kids who never got to experience that. My wife, who we've been together since we were 15 years old. I've known her since she was 5 years old. So she's been through it all with me and had gone to many, many games there when I was playing. It was so special to go back. And until last summer, we still had a home there too. Mm-hmm. So that meant a lot to me, and I was very, very honored that they considered me for that.
Really cool moment, you getting inducted into the ECHL Hall of Fame. Also, this is just one big tire pump for you, really, here these first few minutes. We are going to get to some questions about kind of the hockey operations side, but also wanted to bring up you winning the Thomas Ebright Award here the last couple months ago at the awards gala at the annual Board of Governors meeting for the AHL. Congratulations on that. I believe they cited lifetime contributions to the AHL, which sounds like a fancy way of saying you've been very impactful for a long time. But did you know that award was coming? Did you have a heads up?
No, I didn't until I got the agenda for the meeting, and they list who was up for the Hendy Award, which is Executive of the Year, which I think it was 07, 08. Again, I'm putting years on me here, that I was fortunate enough to win. And then, so I'm looking at who was up for the Hendy Award, and then I looked for the Ebright, and I saw my name, and then my competition was David Poyle. And I'm like, oh my God. I said to my wife, I'm not winning this year. Like, he's retiring. And
you don't want to be the guy that beats David Poyle, his retirement.
You know, and David Poyle, it's funny because David Poyle and Barry Trotz are the ones that gave me my first chance in the American Hockey League with Baltimore. And
the Skipjacks,
Skipjacks.
Nice.
And they gave me my first game, which didn't go too well. And it was against Martin Brodeur, actually, with the old Utica Devils. But, you know, it's the American Hockey League. I love, you know, it's so family oriented from everything that happens day to day in our offices to the business side of the league. And when we have our meetings in the summer, and, you know, it's something that I absolutely love. And I've had several conversations over the years with both Stan Bowman and now Kyle Davidson that I don't ever want anything different in our organization than to be where I am with the Rockford IceHogs. I said, maybe it's because I was a minor league player, so I know what these players are going through on a day-to-day basis and how hard they're trying to get to the National Hockey League. And it happens for some of them and it doesn't for some of them. But I love everything about being in Rockford, running the IceHogs, and, you know, and I've told Rocky before his passing, like, if I'm here for the next 10 years running the IceHogs, I'm very happy. There's nothing else I want to do more. You know, some people, are like, well, you don't want to be in the NHL. And I go, I am in the NHL. It's just my job is to run the IceHogs. And I'm fine with that. So many young people getting into both business and sports, they try to climb that corporate ladder so fast. They don't realize maybe the rung of the ladder that they're currently on is maybe the best niche for them. And for me to best serve our organization is to be running the IceHogs. And it's something I take a lot of pride in. I love. I've got to know so many fans here. I try to make sure and walk the concourse and talk to fans and be open and hear the good and the bad and, and be accessible for them. But I love it here. I love running the team here. And, this is other than my family, my biggest joy in life.
That's really uplifting and holistic to hear. And that was some advice that I think probably a lot of us in different walks of life could take to heart. I do want to bring up, and you kind of mentioned Rocky Wirtz. Probably shouldn't go much further before we acknowledge the owner of the Blackhawks passed away back in July. Do you have a Rocky story that you can share? I know that we had a bunch of stories get told over the last couple of weeks at his funeral, his ceremony, but he meant so much to so many in this organization, and I'm sure he meant a lot to you as well, from what it sounds like.
Well, he was just so, uplifting as an owner. He was always jovial. He was always had a big smile, shook everyone's hand. Didn't matter if you're an intern or the head coach, you're being treated the same by Rocky. And, at the end of my first contract with the Blackhawks, we were in playoffs in 2011 versus the Vancouver Canucks. And I was out in Vancouver and I really started not feeling well, to the point where I didn't want to go bother the team doctor, but I went. And long story short, they ended up doing blood work every day for the next probably month and a half. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was very jaundiced. They were testing me for everything. I was sleeping probably 15 to 17 hours a day. And, the message came from our organization that don't worry about your contract. You have a job. Just get healthy. You have a young family. Take care of yourself. Don't worry about anything else. And when you hear those kind of things from, and sports can be a very cutthroat business. At the time, the kids were still young, and, maybe I think they may have been, maybe 10-5 at that point, 11-5, 11-6. And what that did for not only me, but my wife, it just took the pressure off. And then fast forward in 2018, when I got sick again with another autoimmune disorder, which I'm full of, and it was Rocky and a good friend of his, Jeff Vender, that, they called me one day. I went from the United Center one day by ambulance partway through a game because I didn't know what was going on. I had become septic with this disease I have called PSC, which is primary sclerosing cholangitis. It's a non-curable disease in your liver bile ducts, which eventually you may need. Life expectancy is about 15 to 18 years without a liver transplant. And Rocky called me shortly thereafter and said, here's a number, call this guy, you're going to the Mayo Clinic. And for your owner of your team to take interest, number one, in your private life, but to go above and beyond and make sure you're getting the medical help that you need, means the world. Mm-hmm. And if they told me they need me to sell programs at the United Center for Rocky, I would go sell programs. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I'm forever loyal to this organization, is because the way they've taken care of me and my family, and always made it very known to me that, hey, if you need a couple of days off, you're feeling, because from 2018 to 2021, every 6 months, I probably spent 5 to 7 days in the ICU, mm-hmm. because my liver would get backed up and I'd end up back in there. And it was never get back to work. It was never, should we cut this guy free because, he's going to need some time off. It was nothing ever crossed my mind like that. They always took such good care of me as an organization, and which in turn takes care of my family. And it just makes me want to work that much harder to make them proud. But one funny story about Rocky is, I don't even know what year it was, but he came out with John Miller for a visit. We're sitting up in the suite watching the game here. You're just, praying for a good outcome when the owner's in town.
Right.
I always have a nice bottle of wine on tap for Rocky when he would get here. And, well, we're going into the third period, and I think we're losing 7-1. And
perfect.
I'm pouring Rocky a glass of wine in the intermission, and he yells back at me, he goes, "Bernie, pour yourself one too. You need it more than I do." And I'm just laughing. And like, he was just always a lot of fun. Like when we would be on those Stanley Cup runs, like he would have a suite right beside us, and he'd always have the good food for me. Like he'd have the pizza and the hot dogs, the hockey food, like the sports food. And he'd always lean over and go, "Bernie, get in here. I got the good food." And he was just always a lot of fun to be around. And but the way that he took care of me and my family from a serious standpoint is something that I'll always remember, and why I always used to tell him, like, I will always, I'll do whatever you need. And, I love running Rockford, and Danny knows that as well. And I take a lot of pride in that. And I'll do it until they don't want me to do it anymore.
Again, that was just the first half of the Mark Bernard interview. There's a lot more coming up in part 2. We also get to some team news and updates from prospect camp as well in the second part of episode 1. So tune in to part 2 of Hog Talk.